Good afternoon, all. Thank you once again for joining us. My name is Aishwarya, and without further pause, let's get started with our next session on NFV and SDN, new paradigm for security and pros and cons of virtualization of network function and software-defined networking. For this, I would like to call on the stage Mr. Rajagopalan Rajappa, who is the CTO, Communication Technologies at Tata Elxsi, Mr. Ganesan Ramani, Lead Auditor IT at Shell, Dr. Sriram Bridavolu, CEO, Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, DSCI, and Rakesh Bhatt, who's a Senior Architect at Nokia. So without further ado, I hand over the stage to the panelists. Over to you, sir.
Hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this exciting session on NFV and SDN. So I hope you can all hear me well.
Yes.
Is that fine? Okay, yes. Okay. So we have an elite panel here because the topic itself is very, very esoteric and extremely good, the way it is revolutionizing the industry. And as you may have heard about SDN and NFV, software-defined networking, and NFV's network function virtualization. We will not dwell too much on what they are, but NFV undoubtedly provides great benefits for the telecom service providers in terms of cost efficiency and dynamic service deployability. Okay, and also likewise with SDN, software-defined networking and all, excellent management controls it provides, and the way to manage complex networks, that's the way to go ahead with. So we will focus in this session on the security aspects of it. So, of course, the panelists have been introduced. They are quite an expert group, I should say. They have vast experience in this area. So what we'll do is I hope the audience will have excellent takeaways from this. So if I were to outline that, if you take NFV and SDN, of course, the SDN controller itself can be compromised, and that would be terrible for the whole network. And with the onset of 5G and other complex networks coming up, you would definitely find that SDN controllers need to be protected. From both SDN and NFV side, you see that compromised hypervisors, if the target is a platform, and then you have isolation failures, platform integrity, DDoS attacks, and so on and on. Other things I can mention are regulatory compliance failures, and of course the ever-growing threat of malicious insiders. And then, of course, we have best practices to counter all of these, like separation of VMs, and management traffic, regular hypervisor patching, and hypervisor introspection, and of course TPM, boot integrity and all that, and volume swap, encryption, VNF imaging, etc. And then we have the container also, which need to be protected. So with that, I would just a very brief outline, but from each one of your perspectives, I'd like you to share with the audience on what you feel the biggest challenges are in this security challenges are in NFV and SDN. Okay, so I would start with Rajgopalan.
Good evening, all. Thank you, Dr. Sriram, for introducing me. So there are two major aspects when we look into SDN and NFV is the SDN and NFV being a pillar for 5G as technology itself. The next one is for all the service providers. There's some backbone of digital transformation part. So when you say digital transformation, all the attempt for them to softwareize and launch services faster, providing opportunity for rapid innovation in the launch, and then for monetizing part, as well as shortening the original legacy life cycle of 6 months to 1 year for network upgrade or service upgrade. So these are the software centralization, and then the NetOps culture bringing in the SDN and NFV paradigm per se. While it is bringing all these benefits, both for telco and service providers, since the softwareization has multiple layers here, right from the software infrastructure in terms of the OpenStack or Kubernetes, starting from there, they're all coming from an open source community. There are expensive vendor-specific solutions, but the whole movement is towards cost monetization, cost optimization, reduction of TCOs from the service providers and various players involved in this. So when they go for it, the open sources there in the virtual infrastructure managers, and then the softwareized virtualized network function itself, and then the interconnection mechanisms between them within the containerized environment. Container per se, the container orchestration. So all this increases the threat surfaces. In the original network appliances, hardware-based appliances, the threat surface is much more limited and contained. If you look into this, because of the open source, because of the multi-vendor bringing in their network functions, their containers, their hypervisors, etc., the extent, the landscape of the threat surface itself is becoming a lot more complex. So this is one of the key things which we need to possibly discuss and hear from the other panel of parts also. One last point I want to add is when 5G comes in, one of the key aspects is the service delivery from the edge. So whatever we discussed about as the tech stack, including the containers and then the orchestration environments, centralized control, etc., needs to be complemented by digital platform, as IoT services, and then having a simplified machine learning part of it for different industry verticals. It could be for factory automation, it could be for use cases like connected car. So all of them needs additional levels of security and then the policies to be there. And this has to be handled in this open and multi-vendor and then the increased threat factors. This is the challenging part, while you had already alluded on the benefits of it, the cost benefit for the service provider, the agility of the services for the customers, and the solutions, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. Thank you for putting it so crisply and nicely, Rajgopalan. I appreciate that. And of course, we would see that the needs are changing so rapidly, meaning that we see the business cases needs are changing. I would take a small example, or rather a big example, is the Tokyo Olympics. There would have been sudden burst of media attention towards Tokyo. So they would have to provision and deprovision after the Olympics are over, all the media channels leading to that city. And then suddenly after that, deprovision many of them, right? So I can't imagine what a nightmare it would be without having SDN and all of these good technologies managing the entire thing. Okay, so over to Rakshesh, who is the system architect in Nokia. Would like your views on the challenges part of it, and security challenges part.
Yeah, so like Rajgopalan,
we can't hear you. You're on mute.
I removed my mute.
I can hear Dr. I can hear Rakshesh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope, okay, maybe I'll try to be a bit louder. So thanks for setting the background of SDNs and NFVs that we are talking here today. Mainly from the security challenges point of view, what I would look at is SDN controllers. Various vendors provide different SDN controllers, and each of them, they seem to have some known vulnerabilities, and every now and then vulnerabilities are published in the public domain. We already have the CVE-IDs if you look at the vulnerability database, and there are some known exploits which are also linked with these vulnerabilities. They pose a risk where a remote attacker can do a lot of things with the SDN controllers. If the remote attacker manages to get hold of the software which can manipulate the network, then it could be a big threat in the sense that data could be redirected, data could be manipulated before it is sent to the destination, and so on and so forth. So remote attackers based vulnerabilities are relatively bigger risk for any component like SDN. And so one of the key points is to if I look forward, if I look towards 5G and beyond, I think the best way to
Hello.
counter.
Yeah.
I hope I'm audible.
For some reason, I could not hear Rakshesh very well, so I'm sorry about that. But probably, Ganesh, could you hear Rakshesh?
Yes, sir. I'm able to hear Rakshesh. Yeah.
Okay. For some reason, I could not. Some problem at my end, or I do not know what. Okay. So, yeah.
Okay. Should I continue with the points I had in mind? I hope. Okay. So I was talking about 5G and IoT networks going forward. And when we talk of these kind of the volumes of data that will come in 5G, IoT, and even beyond, it poses a typical big data analytics kind of a problem where it is important to have centralized cloud-based analytics which can counter these potential vulnerability attacks. There are many ways. I mean, some of them could be based on anomaly detection. Some of them could be even more sophisticated to even predict, attackers trying to exploit certain vulnerabilities. So vulnerabilities in SDN controllers is one of the big threats. There are other kinds of threats like, of course, the distributed denial of service kind of threats are, they could lead to a lot of revenue losses for many telecom companies also. ARP spoofing kind of attacks are there, wherein it is more of initial kind of attack which tends to figure out which computer is sitting where and what is the trace of that, how to reach that computer. Similarly, there are brute force attacks and all also are applicable, and they could be induced in the network via vulnerable software components for SDNs, NFVs, and in fact, these days they are also talking about virtualized firewalls. So if firewall as a service is something which is introduced, and if that itself has certain vulnerabilities, it could also lead to manipulating the filtering rules, the blacklists and whitelists, which are meant for protecting the system. So I would say these are the main kinds of threats that we are looking at when it comes to SDN and NFVs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm assuming for some reason the audio was not getting through to me. But Ganesh, could you please take over next and elaborate on the challenges of SDN?
Yeah. Thanks, Sriram sir. And I think it is a great privilege to be back in the BPM meet of DSCI. So happy to join the panel, esteemed panel. So as you said, sir, I think Rajagopalan and Rishikesh has clearly pointed out the way how this SDN and NFVs pose a lot of challenges. But I would just like to want to take a step back and talk about NFVs and SDNs are the way forward, right? So the way the cloud came in, right? You cannot avoid them in the future. But I would see that the first challenge before the security challenges is the way how these things are going to be implemented in the organization and in big networks. So the reason for moving to an NFV or to an SDN is to have better network security management, better management of network devices, optimizing the cost, ensuring that the pain points of the business, right, is being reduced. And again, these devices have got a lot of security vulnerabilities, and always it's a challenge when someone does as a CISO or an auditor to go through the entire network infrastructure or the estate and find what is there and what is not there. So the first challenge is like, am I right to go to an SDN or not, or a NFE or not? That organization has to look into their current infrastructure, the complexity, and if you are part of an e-commerce, or if you're part of banks, or if you're part of big organizations like retail chains, then you have so much of your network outside, and you have a lot of challenges and things. So NFEs and SDNs will help you to kind of go through this operational challenges and to provide you a central source of managing the network devices. So that is the part number one, and that implementation takes years together to get it done. So having said that, when you come to the challenges, there are a lot of challenges. First thing is like rolling out this SDN and NFE itself is not a small thing, because in NFEs you are virtualizing the entire network devices. So including the configuration, including the setup, the way it works up, the testing, everything you have to take care. And then even SDN, how you want to centralize create a policy map, and with that policy map, how are you going to push it to thousands or 10,000s of devices? So I would say that the implementation challenges are in a greater way. Of course, the security challenges, Rashkeshar and Rajagopalan have already mentioned. So I just want to touch base on the choosing and how you're implementing the program, right? So that's the first piece I want to cover in, sir.
Okay, very well outlined. So, thank you all for your input on what the challenges are. So, next, naturally, would move to the solution space and see what are the countermeasures for these challenges. So, your view of the countermeasures, or what companies should be adopting, or what people who are, the companies that are building SDN and NFV solutions, as well as the ones that are deploying or provisioning SDN and NFV solutions, what they should watch out for and possibly have in their definite part of their checklist and all to look at, right, while they're doing this. So over to Mr. Raj Gopalan.
Thanks, Dr. Sriram again. And thanks, Ganesan and Rakshesh, for pointing out both the possibilities as well as challenges as well. So when we went through the threat and challenges part, the centralized and the softwareization come in first as part of the SDN. The same thing, how it can be leveraged for the centralized policy enforcement also. The programmability of the network itself can be taken advantage for distributing the policies. And in the earlier cases, the network continues to be configured once and reconfigured at certain months or weeks together. In that way, the agility or the dynamism of the network itself is very, I would say, very slow or gradual. But here, the agility which provides by means of the programmability, and then the ability to respond back to the events or the alerts, that's where the power of the SDN and the programmable paradigm has to be used on the SDN side. That is something I want to register here. And then just to build on what Ganesan had said about the SDN NFV, that's something which cannot be avoided or dispelled. That's the way the network and service providers are moving forward. The reason why they are doing a transformation itself is to cut down the costs, introduce the services faster. So this is something, it is a compelling need for them to transform by using this building block SDN and NFV. And that again, I think the most important thing which comes in here is when the open sources are coming, when the softwareizations are coming, it opens up the additional supply chain. That's a kind of an additional opportunity and additional challenge also. But however, by bringing in the multi-vendor CI/CD policy governance kind of chain, in the sense, increase and improve the automation and then the validation before the network is rolled out from the test beds and test benches to the production network. So that is the maturity of the process has to be brought in here, the CI/CD part of it. Additionally, all the open forums, be it let's say that being on 5G and then a lot of open initiatives are going on right from the RAN. If you take the RAN, there are Open RAN Alliance. There is a tip forum in the Europe trying to promote in a big way about what, not only on the architecture, and as everybody sees the software elements and the virtualization, bringing the security threat into the picture, into the board. So there is a working group on each one of this open standard forums, be it ORAN Alliance, be it TIP Forum, be it ONF Open Network Foundation, which is defining the SDN software defined RAN, and then be it on the LNF, Linux Network Foundation, which is trying to define the edge platform, open edge platform, open mobile core, etc. So these working groups, whatever the guidelines and then the test procedures and the interoperability they are trying to provide, I think these are the things which needs to be embraced. But I think we have still miles to go. Even the regulatory bodies needs to step in, country-specific regulation needs to come in, and then try to codify the compliance procedures, certification procedures. I think even to the extent of an independent certification bodies accredited by the government and regulatory bodies to accelerate the potential this technology has in taking the services faster and then responding to the customer reported experience problem as well as the security threats. So that's the way I see the forward-looking path from my perspective.
Really good. Okay, so next would Ganesan please elaborate on the possible solutions, countermeasures, and the way forward?
Yes, sir. So to begin with, the countermeasures, or I would say the way we have to structure the program, right? The NFV or the SDN program. So what is the purpose and what is the objective of going to that? And then build up with a business case of what problem we are trying to solve in, right? NFVs or SDN can be used across multiple industries, as I pointed out earlier. So what are the existing policies, right? What the organization has, and what is their current IT infrastructure, and what are the devices they want to go in the NFV or SDN model, and what are their existing policies, like for example the network security policy or your hardening guidelines, what they follow, and are there any kind of existing regulatory controls, like for example PCI DSS or HIPAA, what are the existing regulatory controls they are compliant with, and with the migration what is going to be the impact. So they need to have their kind of a control set or the control framework, whatever they have got in the existing mode, and when it switched to NFV or SDN, what they want to migrate in. So that they have to be very clear. And then goes your transformation process of migrating into the NFVs and SDN, and then you deploy the controls. So once the control is deployed, how are you going to measure the controls? And again, this NFVs and SDNs are also not away from vulnerabilities, right? So maybe in one way or the other, for example, SDN kinds of centralizes your security. So if you have a big retail chain of more than like 5,000 outlets or point of sale devices, in the current world, if there is going to be a security attack on a group of places, then you have a logical segmentation of your network. Maybe your 50 or 100 outlets can go bad, but again your 4,500 outlets will still run. But in case of SDN, it would be a widespread failure. So what is the impact to your the business impact assessment, or what happens to your BCP-DR, and how do you constantly eliminate vulnerabilities or remediate vulnerabilities in your system, and who are your system vendors? I think Rajagopalan sir touched based upon the Open Alliance and a lot of people coming up. Maybe you might need an attestation body or an independent assurance running it, and what is going to be the operational overhead of it, right? So these are the things organizations should think, and they should make a structured plan and do a slow migration. Again, it cannot be done on a day, but again, which one I want to do it, and what is the business benefit, and how I am going to reach there with a clear program plan, or the basic things. And again, have a sense of security around what they are building, right? And if after going to NFV you say that there is no vendor support or there is no patch, then what are you going to do about it, right? So organizations should be clearly aligned, and they should know what risk they are signing up for, right? So those are the basic fundamental blocks, I would say, to kind of move ahead, and which can also be called as a countermeasures to solve this problem. Yeah.
Definitely. Thanks, Ganeshan. So we have this, we are faced with these big challenges in which technology has raced ahead, but then the misuse of technology or the fact that there could be foul play inside the technology, that is overwhelmingly credible threat or a possibility, right? So, for example, the fact that you can extract out the network functions into a software gives us a great deal of flexibility in management, provisioning, everything. So, but then it also gives the possibility that you could have the switch in one server in another country, and then the router in another country, and then what has happened to your communication infrastructure, in fact, or where is your communication infrastructure? What about the security of the nation? What about all the other possibilities that other countries or nation states or independent threat actors could be acting on in their respective countries? And then where is the security of your country? So do architectures really need to be vetted by our Department of Telecom and all the other bodies, certifying bodies here in India, before they can be allowed to be provisioned in a certain manner. So these are all the larger concerns which are there, and they need to be addressed. And of course, SDN will play a big role in that, SDN and NFV. Yeah. So over to Mr. Rakshesh Bhatt, and for his valuable comments. And I'm sorry, I had a little bit of problem in hearing for some reason this channel of Mr. Rakshesh. But yeah, can you hear me now?
I am able to hear you.
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Yes. Please go on.
Yeah, so I'll just take a leaf from what Ganesan was talking about, for example, in terms of big retailer kind of business, where in an enterprise, a lot of customers, in fact, not only retailers or enterprises, we have, as from wireless telecom domain, we have received certain requirements from some customers wherein one of the perspectives is to limit the attack surface. So if when we talk of SDN controllers, for example, and if it is centralized and if that gets compromised, is there a way to limit the attack surface to make sure that the amount of the amount of disruption that an attacker can that be limited? So there are some ways in which we can do it. First of all, that comes to my mind, which we also proposed it to one of our customers, is doing traffic separation, which involves physical traffic separation, wherein we proposed something like northbound, southbound, eastbound, westbound kind of traffic separations, which also includes one of the key aspects of management traffic to be separated, internal traffic to be separated, and then the external traffics to be proxied with different nodes. So traffic separation plays a key role in ensuring that there is limited scope of access for any attacker. So basically reducing the attack surface. Apart from that, when we talk of software SDNs, so software driving the way the networking happens. One of the key things is the integrity checks of the software or the applications which are taking care of SDNs. When I talk of integrity check, the next step would obviously be to store the keys. Because integrity checks are mainly driven by ensuring that there is a key or a signature validation that happens on the software which gets downloaded. So if we have strict integrity check for every single application which gets downloaded on SDNs, it could help ensuring that attackers don't succeed in putting their own compromised softwares in SDNs. So these are some of the things which we should be, I mean, from my experience, I think these are some of the things customers will be looking for. When we talk of keys, it is important to store the keys in a secure area. So TPMs, like Dr. Sriram spoke about some time back, TPMs and vaults. These days in cloud native environment, we have these vaults where secrets and keys can be stored and retrieved by the applications anonymously in a way that an attacker cannot get hold of the tokens. Of course, even that has some known ways of hacking, but there are but they have much tighter security as compared to the normal mechanisms. The other aspect that comes to my mind would be in terms of strict firewall rules. Typically the denial of service attacks and brute force attacks can have some simple mechanisms at the firewall to protect it at the outset. Also, it is kind of mandatory as we go forward that every virtual machine has its own firewall rule over and above the perimeter firewall.
Absolutely.
So it's not like you just leave it to the perimeter firewall. And having said this, looking at the volumes of data that will get transferred in 5G IoT, I think even that may not suffice. Even though we have intrusion detection capabilities already, we will need intelligent intrusion detection capabilities and intelligent mechanisms to keep updating the firewall rules on a regular basis with the help of AI and ML. So these are the directions where I think the next industry would go for. And so I've spoken about firewalls, which are at the perimeter, at the virtual machine level. On top of that, when we talk of cloud native environments, microservices themselves will need ingress and egress controls. There are various mechanisms to secure pods. So there is a pod security policy that can be configured in the form of some YAML files. We can have ingress securities with ensuring that only secure ports and secure protocols are allowed. So at microservice level also, the traffic ingress needs to be secured. So when I talk of SDN and NFVs as such, they themselves may be exposing certain vulnerabilities, but despite that, if we have some additional mechanisms like I mentioned, it could still ensure that the system level securities are not compromised. So
Certainly.
that's what I was, yeah,
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rakshesh. Good insights. See, the whole thing is there is no doubt at all left that SDN and NFV would form a very important part, probably a part of the critical infrastructure if they're looking at. And they need to be very, very thoroughly audited, tested, reviewed, certified, and in every possible way. So would you like to throw some light on what are the possible things that from regulatory angle, what people could do now to address this problem? Because there are some of the technical areas, solutions and all that. But what is to say that an SDN NFV or an SDN NFV, sorry if I combine the two things, but these providers, the solution providers, the products and the deployments, they are secure from many points of view. Shouldn't the regulators be, should the regulators provide some impose some extra rules on certification of these critical components? So I'd just like to go around and ask for your thoughts. Rajgopal?
Yeah, this is a very important and very critical question, Dr. Sriram. So I think this is an important ingredient the regulatory framework, because the telco network per se is becoming a national level asset in itself. So what comes in, what data goes, and what the technology, how the technology is built, how the technology is being operated. So there has to be a blueprint about a recommended blueprint could be there from the regulatory body. When we say it's a problem important, the reason I'm saying is the kind of problem what Ganesan and Rakshesh had pointed out, the single centralized controller in the case of SDN, and even in the case of NFV orchestrator. So when this singularized entities are being compromised, irrespective of having all kind of bells and whistles, intelligent SIEM, etc., being a single point of failure, Achilles heel, compromise the entire the nationwide infrastructure it requires for provides. So there are the architectural purview, as the way Rakshesh had put across, signaling plane, managing plane, and control plane, what is being accessed out of the enterprise, and then have a stringent firewall rules and access control lists, and then web application filters, certification, etc. Even at the domain level, there could be controllers. As we talk about RAN can have a software-defined RAN controller. Then the mobile can have a mobile level, mobile core level controllers, and then the service delivery platforms which are offering services either from the edge or from the data center might be having their own controllers. So there could be best practices or alternate blueprints also can be suggested in addition to coming up with a broader framework. That's one submission I would have. So second thing is, now there are a lot of open source bodies are working on all this standardization, even on the be it EDC, be it on Open RAN Alliances or TIP Forum, ONF. They all have isolated working groups. There are some convergence are happening, But the regulatory body, nation-specific regulatory body, and bodies like DCI should come in and aggregate them, makes it what is relevant for our context and how the whole thing can be, I would say, with the guidelines and heuristics can be codified, and which could be used by all the ecosystem partners, the software vendors, the vendors in this ecosystem, the system integrators, and the certification. And there be a separate certification bodies also can be established.
Yeah.
It could be a government, or it could be government accredited certification bodies for network function accreditation. Okay, it's like an ISI. I'm just trying to think loud and clear.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And really, because what happens is all the good suggestions given here on this panel and elsewhere, right? People may follow it, may not follow it. And then suddenly everybody is at risk and it is compromised. So there has to be a certain framework guideline. Ganesan, please.
Yeah.
So I think Rajagopalan sir clearly articulated it. So the open standards and the open working group, when they try to come up with this SDN and NFVs, so some of them are still a physical product and most of these are become a virtual products altogether. So if they are coming up with the virtual products, what are the basic standards it has been built on? So there has to be an agreement in that. And the second thing is like the configuration migration from the traditional network to the NFVs and the SDN. If you're using SDN, how are you going to do the configuration migration? And again, with the existing network infrastructure, you already, if you are working in a regulated industry like banking, healthcare, or a fintech, or defense, right? So you already have your controls, right? Certain specific controls. Say, for example, in banking, they use more of a PCI DSS, and which has got very specific controls on network devices like firewalls, routers, how it has to be configured, how we have to manage. So how are these controls are going to migrate when it gets to SDN? The first thing. And second thing, when it gets migrated to SDN, all these bodies like the PCI Council or the ISOs of the world, right? They have to come up and they have to support this kind of a technology and how this can be audited and how assurance can be provided to management on that part, right? So this is a great strategic shift in terms of technology. So I would definitely equate this into something like a cloud, what we had a decade back, right? So when cloud started to come in, all the ecosystem partners started to support. Then you had the infrastructure PaaS and SaaS, and there were standards built around. The Cloud Security Alliance came in, and every vendor said, okay, I would have this minimum level of control requirements, and my products and solution will meet that. So similarly, the existing vendors who are producing products are offering services in this NFE or in SDN space, they have to come to an alignment and say these are the base level security standards which we are going to meet in, and on top of it, depending upon the organization and the regulatory requirement, it has to pitch in. And again, even the regulators around the world, they have to acknowledge that this is on the cards, and this will definitely help business in terms of agility and cost reduction and centralized security management. So we should not forget the benefits what it is bringing into the table. So these benefits have to also be taken into consideration, and regulators also should need and come up with a kind of a draft paper on if you're using an SDN or NFB, what are the things to take care, right? So if that has been given, then it will be a big boost, and it can really help the organization to go through this transformational program on implementing an SDN or NFE.
Sure, thank you very much. So I've now turned to Mr. Akshesh, but we are a little bit, running a little bit in the time. So please.
I'll keep it short. Usually when we talk to customers, they give us one a statement of compliance that we need to fill for security. Just extending the standardizations part that Ganesan and Rajgopalan sir spoke about. I think after the list of requirements for security are standardized, those should be a part of a statement of compliance which must be filled by all the vendors, including even open source vendors. And then based on that, there could be tailoring of the statement of compliance in terms of mandatory and optional requirements, depending on what is the kind of industry that you're looking for. And some of these requirements could also come from, say, for example, in wireless communication, we refer to 3GPP. So those could be some reference standardization bodies, and different enterprises can take some other variants of it. So a statement of compliance is something that comes to my mind, and including, so when I talk of statement of compliance, it includes license related checkpoints also, which means that if a certain vendor is using, say, a third-party solution or a third-party open source software, even the licenses for that should be checked as part of the statement of compliance. And if this statement of compliance is kind of a common statement which every vendor provides, that could be something which and it can keep evolving with new threats and new issues that keep coming.
Definitely. Yeah. So I would now like to pause and see if there are some questions here. So who'd like to read them out? Aishwarya, are you there? Hello. Yeah, possibly I'll just look at the questions. Okay. With devastating impact from threats and complexity in implementing these SDN NFV based network architecture, is it worth deploying them specifically for critical communications? If yes, how many years will it take to use such use cases to securely enjoy the benefits of SDN and NFV? So basically putting a basic question mark in the interests of security. Who would like to take that, please?
I would like to. Okay, Rajgopal, please go on.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So while we, I think being an security topic, we had kind of possibly amplified the thought of that the benefit possibly. That's what this question comes in. So SDN NFV as in transformation is happening. There are multiple operators all over the world had started deployment and trial. Even starting the 4G, even our own home turf, Reliance had been a pioneer in that. And then there are in other geographies like Rakuten and the US, for example, Dish. And then many of the operators are already in a big way pushing into the commercial B2C segment and B2B segment to an extent. The critical communication here, if it is a tactical or something, that is something that's a little bit out of, I would say, at this point of time. But specifically in the market, in the commercial market and business market, it had found its acceptance. And in various parts of the globe, it is in various phases of trials or in the deployment itself. So that's the part I would say.
Yeah. So I think just to complement on what you said, Rajagopalan sir, is like SDNs and NFVs are already existing, right? So for example, I can give an example in the energy industry, oil and gas. You have the retail station and fuel outlets where SDN is already there in use. So when the question Prakash is, I think most probably is asking about the critical communication. So when we mean critical communication, again, it can be different for different people. If you're talking about something like a defense or in a high secure industry, then maybe it might not be a direct deployment, maybe in pockets. And again, they also, these kind of critical industries, they also wait for some standards or some kind of a guidelines coming up from their regulator before they take up this kind of the program, the bigger program. But again, the POCs and things are going on, and some of the industries like retail, the energy, and everywhere, it's kind of proving its purpose, right? So yeah, we have to wait and watch once the standards and things have come up, and then maybe take it forward. So yeah, that's my submission. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So there was one question on how are the API integrations to these secured? Okay. So who'd like to take that up? Akshesh, or how are the? Yeah.
Yeah. So when we talk of APIs, the first thing comes to my mind is the REST interfaces. When we talk of microservices, for example, and ensuring that the vulnerabilities for these APIs are not exposed, and also ensuring that the ingress of this is always checked, also ensuring that secure protocols are always used, we should not allow insecure ports opened, insecure services opened. So as long as these security measures are taken care, also when we establish TLS, mutual authentication should be mandated, strict encryption should be mandated. We must ensure that certificates which are used are not compromised, they are not revoked. So if these measures, and these are typical measures already we take in current scenario also. So if we do these, APIs will be secured.
Maybe I'll just add one comment to that. So in addition to it, the technology like API managers, authentication mechanisms, authorization mechanism, OAuth, there are further layers. Intermediate layers needs to be built in when the whole network is going to be a softwareized microservices based network.
Yes, certainly. So with that, we are practically out of time. There are many questions here, but some of them are already addressed, I guess, in the discussion and in this one. So in the interest of time, we will have to, halt here. So I would like to hand this back. Is there anyone else? Hello? Aishwarya or anyone else who's taking on?
Hi, thank you everyone for joining us and sharing your valuable insights today. So without further ado, I would like to conclude the session, and please wait for some time so we'll start our next track session. And please visit our exhibition booth to explore security and solutions and products. And we have leaderboards to win exciting prizes, and keep sharing your experiences on our social media